Wiradjuri and Kaurna people, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. We have apologies from Councillor Paul Close, Mayor Bill O'Brien and Councillor Sam Mitchell. Are there any other apologies? We've got nothing until we come to confirmation of minutes, and there is a recommendation on page 4 that says, and it's also, I may just direct your attention to the fact that we are trialling this evening the recommendations which become minutes on the screen so that we can see these as we progress. And if there's any changes or any motions without notice or whatever, we can actually read the exact wording, which will make things easier. And also we can ensure that we don't get ahead of our minute taker. So I'll ask people either side of me to give me a dig in the ribs if you find I'm getting ahead of the minute taker, because I've got to check that as well. So this recommendation says that the minutes and confidential minutes of the meeting of the ordinary council meeting held Tuesday the 24th of May 2022 be confirmed as a true and correct record of that meeting. Do I have a mover? Moved to Councillor Lynette and seconder, Councillor Mark. So this has been moved and seconded. So all in favour? Carried. We move now to the second recommendation, is that the minutes of the meeting of the Special Council meeting held Tuesday the 14th of June 2022 be confirmed as a true and correct record of that meeting. Have a mover for that one? Don't all speak at once. Moved by Councillor Lynette, the seconder. Sorry, Councillor Sharon. All in favour? That's carried. Now we're moving on to communications. The Mayor, in this case Acting Mayor's communications. First, there's a couple of things I'd like to say. First of all, I'd like to welcome Anthony Zollo, who's a new planning coordinator in the planning department. He's been with us 4 weeks, so welcome to our council, Anthony, and I hope you enjoy your time with us. There's another bit of information which I can't give you a lot of detail about yet, but we've just received notification of another major grant. It's currently embargoed, so I can't tell you what that is, but that'll be announced, I think, within a few days. So that's very good news for us. A couple of things that I attended. One I mentioned at the special meeting was the local government award that our infrastructure department won, and I just congratulate them again for that. And secondly, I had the pleasure of attending the Kapunda Senior Citizens opening of the extension that council funded by means of a federal grant, and the 50th birthday celebration. Both of those delayed a couple of years by the advent of COVID. It was very well attended, and the ribbon was cut by our local federal member Tony Passon, and he remarked that the Kapunda Senior Citizens, from his experience around his electorate, is the most successful senior citizens club in his electorate, which I think is an accolade to them. And certainly from my observation, the extensions have given the senior citizens a great new lease of life. So well done to them. This agenda is a very long one. I think probably one of the longest in the 16 years I've been on council. So it's a bit of a challenge to achieve this good outcomes with enough time to consider each decision properly and still move along at a reasonable pace. So I did circulate to members some comments from my reviewing of the meeting procedures, which I did in preparation to chairing this meeting. And I'd just like to point out the fact that according to the legislative process for debating motions, there are very strict and restrictive rules. So once a motion is moved, we are actually required to follow those. The way that we do it, and this is built into our code of practice, is that we consider the recommendation which is put up for each report for decision purely as a starting point for discussion. And so we conduct a debate without requiring us to apply those restrictive rules. And this works well, provided that people respect each other and make a point only once, speak concisely, and that's particularly important tonight. So I ask you if you could do that, that would be greatly appreciated. And the other thing is that in order to move along quickly, if you can refrain from moving the recommendation until I ask you to do so, which I'll do once I feel that everyone's had a chance to have their say, then that will mean we won't have to move into that restrictive voting protocol. If we do, I'll remind you what those rules are when we get there, but hopefully we won't have to. So let's move on. Thank you for that. Are there any other elected members who wish to report anything? There's not. There are no requested documents or correspondence to be tabled that I'm aware of. There are no petitions, and so we come to deputations and presentations, and we have one from the Gawler River Flood Management, and I'd like to invite the Executive Director, Environment, Heritage and Sustainability, Ms. Kate Hart, and Kathy, I think is the other one, to address us for around about 10 minutes or a little bit longer if need be, but hopefully you'll be able to fit in that time. So thank you, Kate. We look forward to hearing from you.
Look, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, and thank you very much for the invitation to present to you tonight. Catherine Ward is my project manager, currently managing the Gawler River flood management projects that have been funded through the state government and through the previous government. And we are here tonight to give you an overview in terms of what's been happening over the last two and a half years in respect to the Gawler River and where we're going in the future. So I'll try and make that as efficient as possible, and certainly happy to take questions following. As you know, the Gawler River catchment is a significant catchment, and the Light Regional Council sits on the northern side of the river. It's quite a complicated catchment given the number of authorities that are within it. And hence any approach in relation to managing the Gawler River catchment is somewhat complicated. Back in 2016, one of the most significant flood events occurred, and you'll see that that plan there that indicates how the flood impacted on two wells in your council area. So Light Regional Council is not immune to flooding, whilst a lot of floods do occur at the western end through Virginia and out onto those floodplains. The Gawler River does flood, and there's no pattern in relation to its flooding. So there are times when residents and communities within your council area will be impacted and other times when it won't. The government of the day, I'll just skip over this given the extent of time I have, but the government of the day determined that there needed to be an investment in the Gawler River to manage flooding. And so underneath the previous Liberal government, funding was identified to deliver some initial projects. Part of that funding was to act as a catalyst in regard to how do we manage flooding in the Gawler River catchment for a longer term flooding approach. It's no good realistically just dealing with each flood as it comes. Yes, we can do that. However, we know that flooding regularly occurs every 10 years as a major flood, and then there are minor floods in the intervening years. And so the government kicked in a significant amount of funds to undertake 4 what we call no regrets projects, which were identified through work by the Gawler River Flood Management Authority, of which you, of course, are a member, to try and then establish a future framework in seeking significant funding to have a longer term solution. So Catherine's just provided some photographs here just to demonstrate that from 1917 all the way up to 2016, there have been regular flooding events. The state has a range of strategic documents that relate to flood management. The Department of Environment and Water, for whom I work, is the flood hazard leader for the state, and hence the approach in relation to trying to deal flooding by my agency. But it's not a state government issue solely, and local government would understand that in local government legislation, you have a role in relation to flood management, and that's in those 4 quadrants. Preventing flood management, not only through your stormwater management approach, but also in respect to how we deal with catchments, being prepared for floods, responding to floods through the iResponder program and other programs that local government has been involved in terms of responding to an event. And then very importantly, how the community engages with the local government in recovery. And we see a lot of investment in recovery through local government and state government. But it's interesting, of course, to note that whilst local government has a role, the state government has a role, but so does SA Water, and importantly now the landscape boards, which have moved from an NRM board scenario into a landscape board. So we do have a range of parties involved in responding to flooding. In terms of the money that the government allocated, it is $9 million to the project. The state set up a governance framework because whilst I said it's important to deal with some initial short-term projects, it's the longer-term game that is most important to your community and to the communities in the catchment. So we have a steering committee that is chaired by my Chief Executive, John Schutz, and on that steering committee we have Treasury, Emergency Services, local government, the Gawler River Flood Management Authority, and staff from my division to provide overall steerage. It's really important to have a Treasury sitting at the table because ultimately, in terms of building a business case, I will need to advocate for funding through state government just as much as local government is going to need to advocate for funding to the Commonwealth and to your own community, that you're advocating back into your community, that it's important that as local government you're investing in prevention of flooding just as much as actually picking up the pieces after a flood. We have 2 significant groups. One is the working group that is delivering the 4 projects I'll speak about in a minute. And then the business case, the longer term investment, is a working group that I chair to develop up a solution. Now, there'll always be flooding. I should preface my comments in relation to that. So it's whilst we'd like to prevent flooding, it's likely that there will be some level of flooding no matter where you are in a catchment. The Gawler River Flood Management Authority has commissioned work on a stormwater management plan for the lower reaches of the Gawler River. We will be using that data in terms of the business case to position future works. So what we're trying to do is develop a shared management approach, not only in relation to the longer term project, but also in relation to the short term projects. This particular project is an important project for Light Regional Council. When the Hillier fire went through, there was a significant amount of debris left in that fire ground, creating blockages within the Gawler River itself. We identified an opportunity to clear out some of those blockages. The town of Gawler financially contributed to this project. and manage the project on behalf of the councils impacted by this, and you'll see that data in terms of just how much material has been removed from that particular section of the Gawler River. We have a project in relation to flood warning and working with the Bureau of Meteorology and the landscape boards in relation to the monitoring network, and Light Regional Council does have an investment in some of that infrastructure. We are looking at the levee banks. This is a particular project for the impending financial year, working with property owners and having a look at levee banks. As you'd be aware, the Gawler River primarily is in private ownership. Community owners have, along the years, generated a range of levee banks, some of which are not too bad in terms of their condition, the lower left photo, but the upper central photo demonstrates quite a common approach to levee bank management, which doesn't provide a high level of flood protection, and in actual fact leads to breakouts in a flood year. So we've got a range of qualities along those levee banks. Catherine has been undertaking site visits. The community are really appreciative of site visits, and your staff have been participating in that. It's absolutely critical they continue to participate in those site visits because the property owners are certainly, as I indicated, appreciative that local council is taking an interest in terms of what happens through a flood in terms of their investment on their properties, but also state government. So that's absolutely critical that that is maintained over the coming 12 months. In terms of the ideal long-term solution, as I indicated, we are trying to establish a long-term business case to undertake that. In order to facilitate that business case, the steering committee adopted a structure with Infrastructure SA, which is an independent advisory body. Very important that we engage with Infrastructure SA to position the long-term investment, which will need to be significant. And Infrastructure SA has been providing guidance to us in terms of how to manage the assessment of opportunities and how to guide our advice back into local government and into state government. So we've adopted an assurance framework. I won't go through all of the detail here because, as you've rightly pointed out, your agenda is very busy, but happy to come back to a workshop scenario if you'd like further information. Needless to say, there are a range of opportunities to deal with flooding. Not one opportunity is necessarily going to be the case. We are what's classified as a level 2 project, which means that Infrastructure SA now considers there's a lot of validity in respect to the work that we've been doing and are supporting progressing a business case to actually provide a framework that we would then submit to the Commonwealth Government for funding and back into the state government. You'll see there are a number of gateways. When you do a business case through Infrastructure SA framework, we've undertaken gate number 1. We have had a very good response in relation to support for that, and this coming year are moving into developing up the finite data. One of the significant scenarios that we face is getting enough technical data in relation to that, and we presented to the Gawler River Flood Management Authority last week, and with a request that technical advice be provided through the authority and via local government support in relation to that. And we are currently waiting for being able to move on that project and undertake gate number 2 work to position it in the middle of next year with that support from local government providing that resource. We know there are challenges, and last night we were at Adelaide Plains Council and we had a question as to, why does it flood? All river catchments flood. Is the extent of that flooding. We've had particularly dry seasons over the last few years. A lot of people in the river catchment don't understand that it floods. So some of the site inspections that Catherine has been undertaking has identified that Vietnamese community, particularly down in the horticultural area and residents along the Gawler River, property owners along the Gawler River, some of them have never experienced flooding, didn't realise it would flood. So that's why it's so important to be able to get out there and talk to the community. We know that there's been this fragmentation in relation to managing the catchment, as clearly seen by those levee banks, but also in relation to stormwater management. And we've seen a significant growth rate happening in the catchment area. And not only, of course, around Two Wells, but down at Virginia, but also up around Roseworthy and other places. So, we're seeing a lot more growth happening within the catchment. The benefits that I've identified there are quite clear. In the last flood, over $70 million worth of damage were done just to horticultural produce, let alone impact on community itself. So we know that we've got a business case. We have to demonstrate that the investment in a long-term solution will actually provide a good return for that investment. In terms of the longer term process, won't worry about going into too much detail now, but what is the objective that's most important. We can change the physical flooding pattern and we can do that by intervention, but that's not the only solution. There's a range of opportunities to identify planning provisions so that we actually are managing development appropriately and that we're accepting consequence in relation to that. There's a range of water management outcomes that we can have a look at in terms of what is the value of the water, but importantly, what is the value to the environment for actually managing the flood potential. So, as I said, there's no one-term solution to flooding within the Gawler River. What we are seeking to do is identify a combination of infrastructure work and non-infrastructure work. There are significant opportunities to manage flooding. It will happen again. And what the state has been trying to do is position the work such that local government recognises its role as much as the community does, as much as state government does. So the short-term projects are foundational. They are not the long-term solution. We are identifying options in relation to managing flood. The North Para Flood Control Dam, known as the Bruce Eastick Dam. There are changes that could be made to that. There has been a suggestion of it providing another interventionist approach, the Northern Floodway through the Gawler River Flood Management Authority, which would redirect the floodwaters north of the river. Strategic levies is very important. We know that Two Wells is putting in a strategic levy around that township, but levies are not the only solution. But clearly from those photos, you can see that there is an opportunity to deal with levies. Planning controls I've talked about. And the last one, flood awareness. We know that our communities around the state are bushfire aware, and there's a very good network in relation to responding to bushfires. What we would like to do is have a flood aware community, and it's very important that communities right throughout the catchment understand what is their response to a flood. That's why the monitoring network is so important, so that when the correct information can be provided, then the community can respond, and we're trying to minimise damage. So I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight. What we now need to do is identify what that long-term solution is, working with local government in terms of your investment in that. We know that state government is not the sole investor. We know Commonwealth is not going to be the sole investor if indeed the Commonwealth can be convinced to invest in something significant. We believe it can be, but it might take over the next 12 months to really position that, and then, of course, looking for funding. Local government is absolutely critical. Commonwealth will not fund a major project unless local government is a contributor. We know that from past history. You would have been involved in projects where that's been the case. The new Labor government really has a mandate in relation to all levels of government contributing to major works. And so I just wanted to probably close on that we're looking for the longer term solution in the coming 12 months, and we'll be keen to work with local government on what that actually looks like. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Kate. Do elected members have any questions of Kate? Councillor Simon first.
If I may, you were stating that every 10 years or so there's a major flood. In your forecasts or in your projections and the occurrence interval, is that going to increase or decrease or going to stay the same?
That's a very good question, and one that's difficult to answer, of course. So we can only look at the history of the river and say, on average, every 10 years there's a significant flood. But as I pointed out, there's a lot of development that has occurred within the catchment. Now, the Barossa Council is undertaking a fair bit of stormwater management approach to try and manage the stormwater entering the catchment. But I would suggest that the extent of flooding is one that's difficult to predict. The stormwater management plan modelling that is being undertaken through the stormwater management plan funded by the Gawler River Flood Management Authority will provide us with some guidance on that. They're working on a range of models. I have not yet seen what that data is. Catherine is trying to work closely with them in respect to being able to obtain the data so that we can continue to input elements within that model in order to assist in positioning that longer term solution. But it's needless to say that nobody knows where the river will flood or break out. We haven't got a clear understanding. It doesn't do it at the same spot in any of the floods. So, that's why prevention in relation to flood mitigation is important and flood prevention. But I'm hoping the modelling will give us a bit more advice in terms of the extent of potential flooding.
Thank you for that, Kate. Councillor Lynette, use your microphone, please. Oh, he asked the question. Okay.
I haven't asked the question I was going to ask.
Okay, that's good. That's efficient. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much, Kate and Catherine, for coming along as well for that. It's a very important topic, particularly for the people in that area. So we appreciate the update. Thank you. And now,
thank you very much.
Normally, it's normal practice for us to bring forward any agenda item that's related to a presentation. In this case, we have item 11.1, adoption of the draft strategic plan for the Gawler River Floodplain Management Authority. And I would suggest that that be brought forward, and I'd need to have a resolution to that effect. So would someone like to move that 11.1 be brought forward? It's moved by Councillor Simon, seconded by Councillor Sharon. So you've basically a little bit of time to get that on the screen. And so that's carried. So we move forward to 11.1 is actually on page 36. And there's a very simple resolution there that now on the screen. The author of this report is Andrew Philpott. Andrew, do you have anything that you wish to add or highlight from that report? Okay. That's the for those who, because Andrew wasn't near a microphone, said that he has to know everything, it speaks for itself. Are there any questions for clarification from any member of our elected body? Anyone wish to make a comment? If not, there is that recommendation, which I now ask that that be moved as the motion moved by Councillor Lynette. I'll just wait till this is the important thing about having it on the screen and why I have Rich alongside to pick up. If we get too far ahead, then of course that makes it difficult for accurate minutes to be recorded. So Councillor Lynette moved it, and I think Councillor Sharon seconded it. So we'll wait for that to happen and be ready to vote then. It's now up there, so all those in favour, against, carried. Thank you for that. We now leap backwards to business arising, I believe. I haven't left anything out, just let me check. That's correct. So as has been the practice in recent times, I'll just do that page at a time. So the first page of business arising is page 7. Thank you very much. See you later. Thanks for coming. Are there any items from that anyone wants to raise? No, if not, the next one is page 8. Any items from there? I think a lot of them are in our agenda tonight. No, and next one is page 9. No. So we then come to recommendations from committees. And the first one of those is the Economic Development Panel meeting on the 6th of June. And recommendation 1 is that the agenda, reports and minutes of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Economic Development Panel meeting held Monday, the 6th of June 2022 be received. That's up on the screen now. So would someone like to move that? Moved by Councillor Mark, seconded by Councillor Lynette. We're looking at recommendation 1, sorry. Yeah. So two fairly similar ones, easy to look at the wrong one. So there's now been moved and seconded. That point's been clarified. All in favour? That's carried. There's only one item there. Does anyone want to withdraw it or make a comment about it or ask a question? If not, the second recommendation, which is the one that Councillor Kennelly referred to, that the reports and recommendations of the meeting of the Light Regional Economic Development Panel meeting held Monday, the 6th of June 2022, numbered 1, as listed below, be adopted. Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Jason, seconded by Councillor Mark. All in favour? Against? Carried. So that's all covered off on the minutes. So we move on to the Audit and Risk Committee meeting. And we've got the first recommendation again, which is that the minutes of that meeting be received. Moved by Councillor Simon, seconded by Councillor David. All in favour? That's carried. Next question is, are there any items for withdrawal, discussion or consensus? There being none. Sorry, there is. Sorry, Simon.
I just would like to make a comment to.
Can you speak into your microphone a bit more?
Sorry, I would like to make a comment, if it's possible, to just the public consultation, item 2, if I can. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So just at the end, for those who were present at that meeting, it was just we are talking about the rates, obviously, because it's the annual business plan, and there was just at the end, both of the independent members clearly wanted to point out that the way the rates are set shouldn't be. First, we have to figure out how much money do we need to run the council, and then we set the rate in $1 to achieve that sort of income. And this is purely about the distribution of the rate burden across the land use. And she was just very adamant to point that out, because there is still the confusion that an increase in valuation could be a windfall for more council income. And that's really not the case. So the increase in valuation is no reason for increased revenue. It is really all about, we need to figure out how much money do we need to run the council. And then we set those land use rates to achieve that income. And I just want to make sure that that's understood.
Thank you, Councillor Simon. That is a very important point. And if you read the annual business plan statement, that is in fact the way it was done on this occasion. And every occasion before that, however, the way it was presented quite often did give the wrong impression, unfortunately, which is regrettable. So thank you for raising that point. Are there any other comments or questions? If not, we'll move to recommendation number 2, that the reports and recommendations of the meeting of the Light Regional Audit and Risk Committee meeting held 15th of June, numbers 1 to 5, as listed below, be adopted. Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Simon, seconded by Councillor Lynette. All in favour? Carried. That's all done then, is it? Moving on now to reports for information. And I will continue with by asking the presenter of the report whether there are any additional matters that you wish to raise or anything you want to highlight. Lorinda, are you all happy with that? Want to add anything more?
While it's only a report for information, I'm guided by the elected body's preference on the length of the funding round, so the closing date, if they would want to make any suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? If not, we'll move on to 10.2. It takes the village program grant funding. This is a very interesting program that appears to fill a fairly significant need, which has increased by the sound of it. So, Pepper, do you wish to add anything else?
Not too much extra to add, mainly that to draw attention to the fact that we'll have a presentation at the September meeting, and that will provide more detail on the results that we've received and also some solutions to what we can do. But it's going to be, I guess, a program or an issue that needs to be looked at over the next, long term, so in up to 10 years. So it's not a short fix, but something that we'll hear more about along the way.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments of Pepper? If not, we'll move on to the Reconciliation Action Plan update by Craig. Anything you want to highlight, Craig?
Sorry, no, thank you on this one. I think it's
good.
fine.
Any questions or comments? If not, we move on to the Legatus Group unconfirmed minutes June 2022 meeting. Richard, you okay? Any questions or comments? If not, we'll move on to 10.5 unsealed road service levels, and I thank Jason for doing this. This came by the Infrastructure Committee, but because we didn't have a meeting, it's been put into the main agenda, and I think it's important that it is there because this is something that affects everybody, and hopefully over time our committee might be able to look at that in some more detail. Hopefully we can achieve some better service outcomes. Do you want to add anything to that, Jason or Richard? No. So any questions or comments? No. So we'll move on. The Main Street Kapunda Traffic Management Report, which ties together quite a few things that have been discussed or requested from elected members and members of our community. So, Richard, or you have any comment you want to make there, Richard?
No further comments on that. I think, as you said, it's just brought a range of matters together, and we'll take those matters to DIP as a whole, and hopefully get them to bring it back.
Thank you. It's very useful, I thought, to have all those recorded in one place so that we can actually get the overall picture. Any questions or comments? If not, let's move on to the dog park agreement and I think Megan's here. Is there any question? Are there any questions or comments? Anyone or any comment from a staff member about that? That's pretty
No comments from staff.
self-explanatory.
No comments.
Oh, Megan, thank you. We move on now to the former Rundle Bowling Club site. There was this is basically just information that Councillor Mosley has requested a report be provided to on this particular topic for the July meeting. I think it says. Councillor Mosley, do you want to make any other comments on that?
No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
It is
If I can get those points attended to, that would be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
So that's been taken on board, I understand. We now come to the Roseworthy 10.9, the Roseworthy Township Expansion SA Water Supply. And I'll just hand over to Craig to highlight any points that there's a fairly lengthy, complex report to highlight any issues that, or basically, what are the take-home points, important ones from that?
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, this matter's been presented to, I guess, link in with item 14.1 in the agenda. And the report is, I guess, self-explanatory in many respects, but it is detailed. But essentially, the matter that is at hand breaks down to, I guess, a matter of one developer seeking a potable water connection. Their land is towards the southern end of the first part of Roseworthy, adjacent to Kangaroo Flat Road, and they don't have a direct connection. And in those circumstances have sought through SA Water to have a connection put in place. Now that fundamentally is a matter between the developer and SA Water. We as council don't have a role. We have tried to facilitate dialogue in this particular circumstance because there has been communications with council. So we thought that was important to make the point. I guess also that because this matter sits between SA Water, the developers involved, and in this instance, the Department of Infrastructure and Transport, our recommendation is to leave it to those parties to progress the matter and resolve it. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to raise any matters, ask any questions relating to that? Councillor Simon?
I first want to say I totally agree with what Craig was saying. I think if we can leave it to them, that'd be great. It'd be obviously even better if they could actually work with each other a bit more constructively, but there's not much we can do. It's just one thing that sort of I thought was a bit odd was in there somewhere it says in response to that situation, it says somewhere that LVG offered to construct this 30-meter extension of the water mains with a projected construction period of 6 weeks. That was back in March, but then Higginbotham said that's not going to work with their time frames. But now we are like 3 months later. So how did the 6 weeks time frame not fit into Higginbotham's tight deadlines while they're 3 months later still haven't done anything? So it just seems a bit odd to me. Is there any explanation to that?
Probably through the chair, sir, I probably don't have as informed a response to that, but my understanding is that whilst plans for that extension exist, there was still a need for a further agreement between that developer and SA Water to enable the works to proceed. Further to that, my understanding is that the Higginbotham, being the southern developer's work, had advanced to a point that shifting to an internal arrangement was actually going to be time prohibitive and possible. I'm not sure on the cost matter, but certainly time prohibitive from their point of view. And I understand that they have other commercial arrangements in place that they need to hit certain deadlines as well, with some of their prospective clients being obviously tied to home builder grants and that sort of thing, which are around at the moment. Yeah.
Just further to that, this is something that we can't second guess. It's a decision by Higginbotham for their commercial priorities, and their commercial priorities may not be the same as LVG's. And so a 6 week time frame, how long is 6 weeks? You know what I mean? Any other questions or comments? Peter, sorry, councillor Peter.
Are we going to consider my motion on notice on this?
Are you
Topic.
requesting that you bring it forward? We bring it forward because I'm happy to accept that request and vote on it.
I think it'd be sensible.
Well, that's also similar to what we have done in previous occasions. So if we, what councillor Kennelly is requesting is that item 14.1 be brought forward to be considered now. Do we have someone who would like to move that? Are you moving it in fact?
I'll
Councillor
move it.
Kennelly? Do you have a seconder? Councillor David? All in favour? That's carried. So let's see whether we've got that there. So that we have. So we now have that item to consider. So that's on page 101 if you're looking for it. And Councillor Kennelly, do you wish to speak to this?
Yes, just
Can I just perhaps say that in the interest of having a full discussion, that we discuss it before we move it. Otherwise, we're restricted to this. Only one
yes,
person,
good.
get what I mean? And we may need to have a opportunity for everyone to have a say.
Yes. Now, all I really have to say, apart from what's in the motion on notice in the agenda, is that I learned about this whole matter and I'm very concerned about it. By way of explanation, SA Water provided a high pressure 300 mil trunk main along the boulevard and then turning into High Street. And it goes to the end, it is there installed. Its purpose is to provide Roseworthy Township expansion with adequate water, of course. And the termination of it at present at the end of High Street is blanked off, and it hasn't been, it's intended by SA Water to supply the Hickenbotham estate on their planning. It's blanked off. There needs to be a 30 or 40 metre junction into the Hickenbotham estate, and it was delayed, I understand, because the levels had to be set for that junction. Anyway, an alternative proposal came from the Hickenbotham group, and that was to extend the pipeline from further north down the Horrocks Highway and along the road reserve of Horrocks Highway down to Kangaroo Flat Road. Now, two things. Firstly, the State SA Water Department has made provision. Secondly, DIT are not in favour of having the road reserve excavated and a pipeline installed. Unfortunately, the proposed pipeline going along the Horrocks Highway would involve crossing the Seagull intersection and also some which currently is to be ceded to the DIT at the end of this year, And then the amenities, the lawned area and decorative wall, which are on Land Vision's land and are under their ownership at present, but intended to come to us as a council asset further along. Now, this Horrocks Highway extension seems to me to be unnecessary because SA Water have already supplied what they have supplied. And the other aspect of it is that, of course, the asset, or the two assets, the DIT one and the council one, are going to be damaged by a Horrocks Highway extension. And my purpose is to get council to intervene in some way. Now that's the nub of the matter as I see it.
Thank you, Councillor Kennelly. Does anyone else want to ask a question or make comment? Councillor Simon.
I just wonder how could, after hearing what the reading the report from Craig Dole and hearing what we just heard, how could council intervene when it seems like we can. So
The two possible, there are several possible means of intervene. I looked up on my iPhone dictionary, which is reasonably up to date, I presume. One is to mediate or to ask, that sort of thing. The other is to force or direct. Clearly, we can't force or direct. From the report, it seems to me that we have asked already, in passing on LVG's request to Higginbotham. Is that correct? So your question is a good one because what else? The other question I'd like to just ask Councillor Kennelly is, where did you get this information from?
I beg your pardon?
Where did you get the information from?
I got the information from Land Vision Group.
Did you check any of that with council staff at all?
No, I didn't. I had from Land Vision Group the SA water supply plans. I had a map of the Roseworthy Township expansion and the proposed pipeline along Horrocks Highway, and I could see definitely it's going to cross the Seagull intersection. And there was a letter from a solicitor's letter from under the hand of John Goldberg, we've encountered previously, the individual, laying out the situation. Now, I didn't want to become embroiled and inflame the situation, and I thought it was properly to be brought up here at council with a suggestion that council intervene and express its concern. Now, Craig Doyle, I think, has said that council has already done that. Is that the case, Craig?
Look, I think through the chair that our response has been more akin to communicating the concerns between the parties. So acting almost as an intermediary and in contact between both the developers, SA Water and DIT. But we haven't interjected other than to raise the matter between them and suggest that there be discussions between the parties to resolve it.
If I may say something else, I think that the matter, as far as the state government, is really already settled in that DIT has made its requirement clear as far as Horrocks Highway goes, and SA Water has supplied the 300 mil trunk, high pressure trunk main, which leads to the Hickenbotham estate. Now, we have two South Australian government departments expressing their wishes, and I suppose that that's the way it will go, or at least I hope it will go that way, because I don't want to see our intended infrastructure damaged.
Thank you for that, Councillor Kennelly. That is your understanding. Given that as a council, we don't have any direct involvement in that, that understanding may or may not be totally correct. We are unable to check. You've got some information which may or may not be correct. We probably don't have the power to do all the due diligence necessary to find out the full and complete story. So that's an issue, and Councillor Lynette wants to say something.
I just don't know why LVG didn't come to council, why they have gone to Councillor Kennelly with all that information, and why didn't they come direct to council?
They did.
Yeah, but why weren't we advised?
With respect, you're being advised now by way of the agenda and a motion on notice on the agenda. Now, I'm not making any decision.
No, I know. I know.
It's placed before council, and it's my hope that the existing infrastructure not be damaged. It's as long and short as that.
Councillor Kennelly, I have, in my role as presiding member, I feel that I need to advise my concerns about the impact of a couple of the statements in here, which could possibly run the risk of being detrimental to council. You have stated in number 2, the Hickenbotham intention. Have you checked with Hickenbotham?
No, I haven't.
So that's an assumption. In number 4, you have made some statements about Hickenbotham workers and a council employee entering the RD area which belongs at present to LVG without permission and subsequently marked out the proposed pipeline excavation. That is an implied slur on a council employee.
Well, I don't, with respect,
You are implying that the council employee has done something improper.
no, I'm
Well,
implying,
without permission.
I'm stating that a council employee whose name I understand is Sagar or something like that was present when the delegates of Hickenbotham were in the LVG land. Now, I don't think that's good. I wasn't there. Are you saying that if I wasn't there, I'm not telling the truth? Or?
No, I'm not saying that at all. But
Oh.
I'm saying that is implying something proper. You can argue it doesn't, but someone reading that could get that impression from that. And that was covered in the report that Craig put up as well. So what I'm concerned about with this motion, it looks at it from the view of one developer, the local, the LVG. What I'm concerned about is we don't, as a council, want to be seen to be partisan. And I think that given that the information only come from one developer, was not checked by council,
May I?
is a concern to me in terms of what this says to council, to people if council passes this motion. That's my concern as an elected, as a presiding member. I've got an obligation to state if I am concerned that a particular motion may be detrimental to council. I believe this will, and I've given my reasons why. I'm happy to listen to your reply.
My only concern is for the infrastructure, and as ward councillor, for the existing infrastructure which exists there now, portion of it, the Horrocks Highway, Seagull intersection, is to be handed to the Department of Infrastructure and Transport at the end of this year. And the other part, the beautification, which has already been done, is also going to be impacted by this. Now, I don't think that I don't believe that I've made any implication as you suggest, and so I stand by what I've written.
I thank you for that. Are there any other questions, comments? Councillor David.
I can't believe that we've got two major developers here having an argument this far down the track, when it seems to be that what it needs is a bit of common communication between the two parties and stop the point scoring. And let's get on with fixing the problem.
You know, Councillor David, that's a very good question that we don't have the power to do anything about. It begs the question, why was that stopped 30 or 40 metres short of the boundary? If it was at the boundary, it wouldn't have been a problem. Councillor Peter.
I was informed that it stopped 30 or 40 metres at the end of High Street because Hickenbotham Estate had to establish a level for the pipeline junction to be taken into their estate. That's what I was told. I haven't been there.
Okay.
I don't have any particular knowledge.
Thank you. We're getting into technical aspects here, I suppose, which really beyond our scope. I think the key thing is that we as a council have no power in this matter. Whilst we can express concern as we have, I understand about the disturbance to what's already been established. It's not in our power to do anything more than that. So having any other comments? Councillor Annette.
I'd just like to know whether Craig was informed of all of this from Higginbotham's, what they had done. Were you informed of all this or not? Or have you no handle on it?
Sorry, what was the last part of the question?
I said, if you got a handle on it, do you know, did you know all about this and what was your response?
Through the chair, my information's come from various sources within council, from the staff who've been communicating with the parties involved. That's included aspects from LVG, from Hickenbotham, from SA Health, to a lesser degree from the Department of Transport. But I won't suggest that we've got all the information in relation to this, and nor would we. We're not the authority. SA Water's the authority in the matter, and we're simply an intermediary in this particular instance. And I understand the difficulty that is before those decision makers in terms of the situation that's presented. But what I guess I'm stressing here is, because we have no role, I recommend we don't get involved.
Okay.
It's that simple.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And if there are no other comments, questions or anything, Councillor Kennelly, is it your wish to move that motion?
Yes.
That's been moved by Councillor Kennelly. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor David. All in favour? Against? The motion is lost. Thank you for that, Councillor Kennelly, and it is an issue of concern, but our power in it is somewhat limited, as we've just heard. Now we need to go back to reports and information. Sorry, thank you. I'll just find the spot while you're okay. If we go back to page 35, we get to 10.10, the CEO employment agreement. And this is authored by Terry, who's not here. She's on leave. Anyone wish to make any comment about that? Councillor David.
I thought this was all now in the public domain.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, where do we go on the iPad to actually access the full report on it?
If I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the agenda. It's in the agenda, is up on the council website. Is that correct? Sorry.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, that was appended to the agenda. The reports with the relevant minutes.
Sorry, I missed that.
The reports and the minutes were appended to the agenda that you have today.
You,
Thank you for that, which means it is in the public domain. And there's a recommendation at the bottom of page 35 that the reports for information be received and the content therein be noted by council. Moved by Councillor Lynette, seconded by Councillor Jason. All in favour? That's carried, and we'll just wait for that to be recorded. All done. So the first report for decision 11.1 we've already covered. We now come to the 11.2, the adoption of the 2022-23 annual business plan, budget and long-term financial plan, declaration of rates, etc. And we've been through a very lengthy process with this and been to public consultation. Having passed the draft budget for public consultation, we've got no responses to that. So I'm going to ask Nigel whether he will give us a very brief presentation.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I think it's probably fair to say that you've heard enough from me over the last 6 months. It's been a long road since probably early February when you first heard me talk. It's probably fair to say that the world's changed a little bit in that time as well, and that it's probably worth highlighting that there will be some significant economic pressures on this budget. And even though you've heard me talk about the significant changes to the budget, we're going to have to put it under close scrutiny over the next few quarters or so to ensure that we maintain expenditure and revenue within the framework. The main thing I'm here to talk about, though, is really the resolution. And hopefully you've all got in front of you the sheet of some changes to what was in the report. What was in the report, I highlighted a number of areas where there were still numbers to be finalised. Those numbers relate to the finalisation of the valuation by the State Valuation Office. So we've now got the final figures. The final figures are on the sheet. That final evaluation does bring in a small amount of additional revenue of approximately 20,000 net effect on the budget. I'm proposing just to keep everything very, very neat, so there's no changes to the actual budget public numbers, that we add any additional revenue we get from that valuation change to the discretionary rebate area. Because you may recall that when we talked about the rebates for the rapid changes in valuation, we did an estimate of what applications we may get. So that is our best estimate of something that hasn't occurred before. And also we will be promoting, because of the nature of, I suppose, the economy, we'll be promoting to the public when we do send out the rate notices that if there's any serious concerns that ratepayers might consider a hardship application to the council. So there'll be some additional monies for discretionary rebate should you receive any of those hardship applications. That way we don't have to change any of the numbers in the business plan or the budget. Hopefully that's clear. So in terms of what I'm hoping that someone might help us resolve once I get through the sheet, is that in recommendation 3, we now have a final number there for the general rates as calculated on the latest valuation, which was received yesterday. So the total general rates, as the rate notices we sent out, will be $18,701,405. So that's the number I'm hoping will be inserted in the resolution, which has already been done by Stacey, all ready to go. In recommendation 4, we've got 2 very large numbers of 4 billion odd. The first number of 4,345,000,000, etc. That's the total valuation provided by the State Valuation Office. The second number, 4,281,000 odd. That's the assessable value. So those the difference obviously being those that are exempt from paying rates, including council properties. Recommendation 6. And I thank the acting mayor for some very close scrutiny of the recommendations in the report that went out, because the fundamental issue with the recommendation that was in your report was that it referred to a local government power for restricting, capping the rate in accordance with section 153. As many of you have heard through my rating policy discussions, that's not the power that we were actually talking about. It's section 166, a discretionary rebate. So consequently, we've completely changed that recommendation 6. And it also gave the opportunity to have a bit of a nice tidy up of some of the words, ensure that everything's perfectly correct in accordance with that rebate requirement. If anyone required me to, I'd be happy to read it out, unless we'll take it as is. The recommendation 9, inclusion of a number for those people that would like to request an additional bin under refuse, domestic refuse and recycling. So an additional bin cost would be $75. I'd like to include that. And finally, recommendation 11, we now have the exact numbers for the regional landscape levy. So you've got a rate in the dollar that needs to be inserted in the resolution. And the capital value is the same as in recommendation 4, which is the accessible value. I just highlight also to you, maybe for scrutiny at your leisure, on the reverse side of your sheet, I have given you some examples of how capping the rate rebate will work. So I won't go into that in detail, but if anyone's got any questions after the meeting, by all means contact me and we can discuss those. That was all that I was intending to say at this stage, acting mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel, and I think I can say this on behalf of our council. Thank you for letting us through a very thorough and I'd say easily understandable of a fairly complex task in preparing this budget. I think that's been appreciated by us, so thank you for that. Are there any questions that anyone wishes to address to Nigel?
I do have one question. It's quite specific, but just going through all the assessment numbers that get a rate rebate. There's one that just stuck out. I mean, it's Telstra Corporation. It's 100% rebate. And last time I checked, Telstra had a market cap of $31.24 billion. So I'm wondering why they need a 100% rate rebate.
Can anyone provide an answer to that question?
Excuse me, it's page 49, and it's assessment number 10,039.
That's a phone tower. So there's probably, I would assume, some legislation that provides that. Is that correct, Nigel? Do you aware? Yeah. Yeah, that's, sorry, that is the mobile phone towers on top of Country Hill. So they don't ask. That's the reason. I mean, it's a legislation. We have to do it, apparently. June.
Through the chair, the only reason I could think of was that it was council needed it to be put on Gundry's Hill or utilises it, so that's why it would be exempt. That's the only reason I can think, but I'd have to double check as to why, because that would be unusual for Telstra. I agree.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Simon? Any other questions? Councillor Jason.
Just through the chair, on recommendation 9, obviously additional bin cost, it's got on there $75. That's yearly, isn't it? Because you've got on there per week.
Yeah, we thought we'd get that one past you, but you got us. So you're quite right. It will be per year.
Unfortunately, it's probably a copy of last year's resolution, so maybe we should send out some bills.
Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, I believe we can pass this, all these recommendations as one motion. Is that correct? I think we've done that in the past from memory. So does anyone wish to move all this single recommendation that consists of many different parts? Moved by Councillor Jason. Anyone wish to second that? Seconded? No.
Just before you do that, I'd just like to make a comment that I believe that because of the tough times that our ratepayers are going to endure in the next 12 months, I don't intend to vote for this to go through. And I believe we should be looking at a 10% reduction in all our department costs across council before we adopt this new rate program. So I intend to vote against it.
Thank you for that. I think the way we'll deal with this has been moved. Do we have a seconder for the motion that Jason put up? We've got a recommendation that's been which now has been moved as a motion. Do we have a seconder? So seconded by Councillor Lynette. Councillor David, do you wish to move an amendment?
No, we'll just run with it and see where we go.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. I'll now put the motion. Those in favour, please raise hand. Motion is carried. Thank you.
Call for division, please.
You certainly may. Those who voted in favour, please stand in your places. Just wait while Stacey catches up with that. this vote. You might have to stand for a little while. And enjoy standing while you can. We've been sitting for a while. This is a first time we've done this, so we just need to be a little bit patient at times, but I think it's going to be worth it in the long run. Fortunately, this can be done by ticking boxes. Just checking that, we've got councillors Jason, Sharon, Lynette, Mark and Simon in favour, councillor David and Peter against. That's correct, I believe. So thank you for that. And now we need to move on to 11.3, the draft environmental sustainability strategy and action plan. And Andrew's here as an author. Do you wish to make any comments about this? Sorry, I couldn't find you there. Or there's Richard or someone not wanted? While Andrew's working up, this has had extensive community consultation and extensive work in the Sustainability Committee. And this is the final draft with some changes from the original.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Dean. Look, it's been a great collaborative process to get to where we are. And I've really very much enjoyed working with the involved elected members and staff members and industry experts to inform this report to date. I think there's some really exciting recommendations that have been well received by our community. That's it. I'm looking forward to working with council in sort of the next 5 years and delivering this plan and doing what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions of Andrew while he's up there? Any questions or comments? Other than that, there's a lot of work that's been put into this. Yeah, Simon, sorry, Councillor Simon.
I'd just like to make a comment, not a question to Andrew. I totally second what Andrew just has said, but I think just one thing that we need to be very conscious of is that making these plans is a great thing, and this is a very good plan. But as long as we don't fund these plans properly, plans don't do any good. I can see that we do have $60,000 for the next in the next budget, but I dearly hope that that's going to be more in the future. Because again, if you don't, we can make beautiful plans, but if you don't put the money behind it, they're sort of worthless.
Thank you for that comment, Councillor Simon. Any other comments or questions? If not, there is a recommendation on the bottom of page 53 that the council receives the draft environmental sustainability strategy and action plan and formally adopts it, basically, replacing the existing sustainability policy. Moved by Councillor Simon, seconded by Councillor Jason. All in favour? That is carried. Thank you for that. You right on that one? Done. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't looking. So we now come to the farm centre establishment phase closeout, and I'll welcome Gavin Schuster to the meeting, who is chair of the group, I believe. And I'm going to ask Simon whether he would like to say a few words and perhaps invite Gavin to speak to us.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Dean. Yeah, I won't say much. I think the report pretty much speaks for itself. It's pretty exciting to get to the end of this administrative phase of the the farm centre after wrapping up the final few matters. So very happy to take any questions, but I think as the executive summary wraps up, that these arrangements we've put in place represent a tailored version of our empowerment model, which enables ongoing community leadership and flow of benefits to the community from operations, while ensuring the empowerment model remains manageable for a community group when a multi-million-dollar building like the farm centre is involved. So with that, I'll hand to Gavin Schuster, who might be able to add further information or take your questions from a Rec Park Committee perspective.
Thank you, Gavin. And thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Simon. Just basically, yeah, we've been working hard over the years to get a sponsorship, naming rights sponsor. It's been a hard road. We've travelled a long way and asked a lot of companies, and it hasn't been easy. But I don't know if I can say that as luck would have it, because your council meeting's tonight. Last night, I'm pleased to announce on behalf of the Rec Park Committee that we have secured 2 naming rights sponsors for a term of 3 years for the tune of $20,000 per year, which is, I believe, is a sustainable amount for companies to pay, and we're very, very happy and pleased about that, because we actually have got other sponsors on board as well. We actually aren't going to use that money for the running of the business. We're actually going to use that money for improving the facility and to enhance the facilities space for people to use, like, whether we have other companies come in and use the facility and stuff like that. So there's going to be on little bits of improvements that we need to do over a period of time, and we'll be able, to afford to be able to use that money for that sort of stuff. But I don't believe, as a sponsorship model, that we need to use that money for general running of the day-to-day business, and I think that's fair. But otherwise, the companies were pleased to come on board, and we're going to be pleased to promote their companies. 2 local companies, I can say them tonight. They are Arns and Johnsons. So we're very, very, very happy about that. And so we're a bit stoked. It just the last yes came in last night at about 5 o'clock. So it's hot off the press. So otherwise, Belgravia, who have been running that centre, we've basically nearly run it now for 12 months. At the end of June, we'll run it for 12 months without too much COVID interference and without JobKeeper. And it's running about where we think it needs to be. Belgravia has sort of looked at it against their other facilities, Tanunda and Kadina, and we're certainly punching well above our weight for the size of a facility and the people, the people that we have come through it. We have a lot of people. I think there's 2,000 to 3,000 people average per month coming through it. Against those other bigger facilities, I think this facility, they said, it's punching well above its weight for what we need to do. So that's about all I've got to say.
Thank you for that, Gavin. And I'll just say that it's really great to see a community initiative that I think has been boiling along for probably 20 years or so before it came to fruition. It's come to fruition, and it's fulfilling a real need. And obviously, because it's punching above its weight, that means that the community is using it.
Look, and obviously the whole community and the whole Light region is very thankful, for the council for getting behind this project, because otherwise, with community support and the council support, it wouldn't have got off the ground, and we wouldn't have what we've got. And certainly, it's a facility that's very envied upon other towns. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions of Gavin? No? Okay, thank you for that. And we've got any other questions or comments that anyone wants to make? Councillor David.
I'd like to ask Simon that question. Just now, I think this is a brilliant project. It's fantastic for Freeling, but I just question, how do we get it so wrong for having to write off 200 grand?
Yeah, I think thank you, Councillor Mosley. The report seeks to outline that. So at the time that the invoice was raised, we made an estimate of the upper limit of what the likely community donations would reach because we did not want to invoice again. We wanted to do one invoice that the community group could use again and again and again to get the money out of the Australian Sports Foundation. And it's on my head that it's 197 grand high. It's just, we did our best at the time and we're 197 too high. So we used our best judgment and the information we had to hand.
David, do you want to know?
You just supplement, Chris. So what have we learned from the outcome of this? What have we put in place that if we get another project on similar lines, what stops us from getting in the same position we're in now with this?
It's probably it's a good question. As a personal reflection on my part, I would probably not worry so much about.
It wasn't intended to be direct.
Oh no, sorry, I haven't taken it personally. But I have reflected on this, and I would second time round probably not worry too much about as much about needing to invoice again and again. So just bring it back down to something that's definitely going to be achieved, and if it goes above that, then so be it. We invoice again. So that was definitely a learning for me. But yes, so here we are.
Gavin, did you want to comment on that? Turn the mic on, thanks.
The only comment I'd like to make about that is probably out of that 197,000 is that there was about $112,000 that the Freeling Rec Park money that we get given every year. We don't save it up to store it for a rainy day. We try to utilise that to improve our rec park facility, and that's the whole of the rec park. But when we were building this facility, $112,000 of our own money actually went into doing and just finishing off that farm centre. And we never got that back. We never asked for it back, but we actually put that money into the farm centre. That was to finish off stuff like the gardens and yeah, there's other bits and pieces little contingencies. But yeah, so that figure there would probably represent be more realistic to be about 90 because we probably put in about 112,000. I think we're about there.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? If not, we have a recommendation. Councillor Lynette. I've moved this recommendation, all 8 parts of it. There's been some bottom of page 57 has been moved by Councillor Lynette, seconded by Councillor Mark. Any further comment? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you for that. Well, that's all done. Stacey, is it? Thank you. The next one that we come across is the 11.5, which is on page 64, and that's the Freeling Town Centre activation. And Darby is the author of this. Is there anything you want to make comment about, Darby?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not a great deal further. It's been a reasonably transparent process so far. This strategic document came to council for endorsement to go to public consultation back in January. We have undertaken that in accordance with our public consultation policy, and we've added a couple of recommendations which relate to potential dog park and RV caravan parking in Freeling, which we think ought to be adopted as part of the strategy moving forward. Yeah, pretty much it.
Thank you. Any questions of Darby while he's at the microphone? Thank you, Darby. Councillor Simon.
I'm not sure if it concerns Darby, but the only thing, I think it's a great thing, and I'm all for Freeling Town Centre reactivation. There's obviously no questions, and the reports are great and everything. I never received a letter, so I was wondering. So I did actually call around, and I called 4 of the 5 owners that I know, and they all didn't receive a letter. So I'm just wondering how, because he says the owners of these places received letters. When I then in turn did talk to Dominic, that doesn't own the building but runs the business, he did receive a letter. So I just wondered maybe these letters went to the people actually occupying the places instead of the owners or something. Or I just missed it. It's quite possible that I don't know. I just never got a letter. I just wondered. That's all.
Thank you for that. Was that, sorry, a question or a comment?
Well, it could be a question, how come me as the owner of a town centre building never got a letter?
Okay, can anyone answer that?
Through the chair, thank you for that. I'll have to follow that up, but certainly we had a draft letter that was to go to occupiers and owners, and my understanding was that that had happened. And I'm curious as to why it may not have. I'd have to take that on notice, I'm sorry.
Thank you for that, Councillor Simon, and for your reply, Craig. Councillor Net.
Oh, I'd just like to make comment on the RV dump. We're just waiting on the minister to get it going. It's all set up. Megan's got it all set up. So that's one thing that's being done now. Yeah.
Good, thank you for that.
That's at Machiski Park.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? No. So someone like to move that recommendation as a motion? Moved by Councillor Mark, seconded by Councillor Lynette. Any further comment? And I'll ask who's all in favour? As carried. And we now move on to 11.6, the bylaw review, which is largely responding to, I understand, government legislation changes. Brandon, do you wish to make any further comment other than what's in the report? Could you get to the mic, please, because people online can't hear otherwise. Thank you.
No, not really. As is in the report, the bylaws are pretty much the same as what they are already. We haven't sought to complicate them or reinvent the wheel or add things that are not necessary. There's a few tweaks in terms of up-to-date terminology. Such things as e-cigarettes have been included as they're now within the community. But overall, the bylaws are essentially the same as the existing bylaws, other than the change to the amount of dogs that you can have in certain areas without having to have a permit, and disregarding or revoking the bylaw in regards to construction noise, because it's been now taken over by the Local Nuisance and Litter Control Act.
Thank you. Any questions of Brandon? Councillor
Just
Lynette?
one, Brandon. How do you go about it if somebody's got 3 dogs in the town and we see them walking around with them, and quite big dogs? What do you do? What's the action?
In regards to whether they get an approval or not, generally somebody will put in for an application. At present, the current system is that somebody will make an application to have an extra dog, because at the moment, throughout the entire town area, district, it's 2 dogs, regardless of where you are. And so the size of the property is looked at, the type of dog is looked at, the person is looked at in terms of have we had any dealings with these people before? Have we had any dealings with the dogs? Is there anything that comes to mind? And if nothing is recorded, nothing comes to mind, then we approve it. I've never refused an application, and we always have the fallback that the permit states that should there be a problem develop, we can revoke the permit, providing we've got just cause and the matter and the reason for that has been proven. We can do that, and that goes out in the letter that they get so that they're clear as to where they stand. And on top of that, the Dog and Cat Management Act has been upgraded over time, and there are provisions within that to investigate and take action in regards to either barking or in terms of if a dog has been a nuisance, such as sometimes you get people say
banging against the fence or perhaps in line with bargaining with, say, a particular problem with people going by, etc. So there are provisions within the Dog Pout Management Act to deal with it, and ultimately we probably would deal with it that way initially because it's state legislation, and then if that matter was proved or that matter couldn't be rectified, and it was proved, then we have the fallback that we can always say to the people, look, the permit says that if there is a proven issue, then the permit is revoked and you're going to have to reassess your situation, how many dogs you've got.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, and for the question, Councillor Lynette. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, there was a recommendation that starts on the bottom page 69 and continues on to page 70. And that's basically to endorse that and a few other things as well, which you can all read, no doubt. Does anyone like to move that recommendation as a motion? Moved by Councillor Mark, seconder, Councillor Jason. Any further comment or question? I'll put the motion all in favour, and that's carried. Thank you. Next one is the Barossa Light and Lower North Regional Public Health Plan, and that's on page 74. And Craig is the author of that. Is there anything additional you wish to add? No additional.
No, thank you.
And any questions or comments? If not, there's a recommendation that's there on page 74. Anyone like to move that? Moved by Councillor Simon, seconded by Councillor Sharon. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We then move on to 11.8, the policy update, code of practice for meeting procedures, which comes about due to the ending of the emergency declaration concerning the COVID pandemic. And that's authored by Carrie. Do you have anything you wish to say, Carrie?
No, nothing further to add to the report. Thank you.
Thank you. This is just merely seeks to do that, plus clarify one other item, I believe. So any questions or comments? If not, someone like to move that as a recommendation as a motion? Councillor, thank you, Councillor David. Moved by Councillor David, seconded by Councillor Mark. No further comment. All in favour? As carried. Thank you. Move on to 11.10. The management agreement for Greenock Centenary Park. Megan. Sorry, I skipped 2, didn't I? My apologies for that. The waiver of clauses related to land management agreement for Hazy Circuit Roseworthy. That's 11.9. Anyone else? Craig, do you want to speak to that at all or not? So it's self-explanatory.
Look, I think it's self-explanatory, but please, sir, and Anthony, maybe I'll answer any more technical questions.
Any questions or comments about this one? If not, would someone like to move that? Moved by Councillor Lynette, seconded by, sorry, Councillor Peter. Sorry, I didn't see you there in my blind spot. Any other comments or questions? I put the motion. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you. And now we move on to 11.10. And that's the management agreement for Greenock Centenary Park. Megan has moved, author of this. She's online. I don't know whether Megan wants to say anything.
Hello, Acting Mayor Dean. Nothing further to add unless there are some questions. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, Megan's available for questions. Anyone got any questions or wish to make any comments? If not, I will ask for a mover. Sorry, Peter. Oh, you want to move it? Thank you. I should look this way a bit more, I think. I miss you every time. So this recommendation now be moved as motion by councillor Peter. Do we have a seconder? Councillor David. Any comment? If not, all in favour? That is carried. Thank you. And we move on to 11.1, which is the Freeling RSL maintenance agreement. And Richard, do you want to make any comment about it? Or Megan, do you want to make any comment about that one at all? Will be available for questions.
No further comment, but if there are questions, I'm happy to take them.
Any questions of Megan on this one? If not, do we have a mover of that recommendation? Councillor Peter, you got in first that time, and seconded by Councillor Mark. All in favour? That's carried. Move on to 11.12, another Legatus one. The Legatus Group Business Plan and Budget, which is also by Richard. Anything you want to say about that one, Richard?
No further comment.
Thank you. Any questions of Richard? If not, does someone like to move that recommendation as a motion? Moved by Councillor Jason, seconded by Councillor Simon. Any further discussion? No. All in favour? That's carried. And we get to another Legatus one, the Strategic Management Plan and Long-Term Management Plan 11.13.
No further comment.
No further comment. Anyone have any questions about this one? If not, would someone like to move the recommendation as motion? That's moved by Councillor Lynette and seconded by Councillor Jason. No further comment. Then all in favour? That's carried. Thank you for that one. And so we come to 11.14. Another Legatus one. Sorry.
Again, no further comment.
Any questions? If not, I shall ask someone who'd like to move that. Moved by Councillor Simon, seconded by Councillor Jason. No comment. All in favour? That's also carried. And I think that's the last report for decision. And thank you. It's a lot of those last ones were sort of very much straightforward housekeeping ones. So it's good that we're able to progress those expeditiously. There's no questions on notice. Do we have any questions without notice? There being none, we move on to motions on notice, and we've already covered the first one of those. We come to 14.2 is the next one, which is Councillor Simon's assessment panel meeting procedures motion. Again, we'll do what we've done with other ones. We won't move it till we had a little bit of a discussion about it. Councillor Simon, do you wish to make any comments about that? I notice you've got a quite comprehensive background information there as well, but any more you wish to say?
I can pretty much reiterate what is written there, but I just think it's important to make the public to make these processes that we have to go through as transparent as possible, that the public understands what we're doing, and that's really further to that is if we can try to change these meeting procedures, as we've noted, we can't do that directly, but we could suggest to the panel that they might think about it, and that's really all this is all about. So I think if you can get a report to them and saying that we want to do that, that'd be great.
Thank you. Any who want to ask any questions of Councillor Simon or make any remarks? If not, do you wish to move that, councillor Simon? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Jason? Any further debate? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Motion is carried. Thank you for that, councillor Simon. You have another one, which is, sorry, I just better wait till you're up to date there, Stacey. Yeah. All right, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. 14.3, which is another one from councillor Simon relating to confidential items. And that motion you can read on the screen. Simon, councillor Simon, do you want to speak to that one?
Yes, over the years I had sort of trouble finding, once if confidential items get released, they're attached to the back of the agenda, as we've seen this agenda today. And we did have a question earlier, where are these release confidential items? And I would have thought it would be much easier to create a designated space, similar as we have on the council meetings or committee meetings or whatever, and you can just see the date and to release the information. I think that would just be much easier for everyone to get around. So that's really what this is all about.
Thank you for that. Does any staff member want to make any comment about the feasibility of doing that? That's, I presume, easily done.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, certainly able to open that up and put that on council's website. I'm happy to provide a report to next council meeting, outlining what would be perhaps a good practice for staff to be able to undertake and deliver that as you'd like it. So if you're happy for a report to come back to next council meeting with maybe what would be a good option for an easy availability for residents and public, but also then easy for staff to manage.
Thank you for that, Carrie. Any questions of Carrie or any other comments? If not, councillor Simon, do you wish to move that? Moved by councillor Simon. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by councillor David. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Councillor Simon has 14.4 as well, which is to do with community engagement strategy. And once again, that's written there before you, which you've obviously had an opportunity to study. Councillor Simon, do you wish to make any additional comment about this one?
Yes, through the chair. So we do a lot of projects, I can list a few: Drovers Encounter, Bonnie 2, Strategic Land Assemblage, Light Country, International Equine Centre, Alden Street, Gerald Roberts Road, 5 Shilling Activation, Regional Indenture, all these sort of things that we do, which are great projects and everything, but none of them actually originated out of a need or a drive from the community. Those are things that actually I wonder sometimes where they come from, but these it's not the community telling us that we need to do these things. They come from somewhere else. So I would be really interested in understanding what the community actually wants us to do. I understand they want us to pave roads and take the rubbish away, but I mean, there's other stuff, and that's really what this exercise is all about. If we could consult with the community more regularly and more deeply, so that they can tell us, like a wish list type of thing. That it could be a survey, it could be something that we send out with a rates notice saying what would you want us to do? What do you think? Is it a skate park? Is it more books at the library? Is it whatever it might be? I don't know. But that's why I would want to go out there and ask. And I think that'd be very crucial. And it's really our duty to listen to our community. And again, it's about transparency, about serving the people that pay us. So.
Thank you for that, Councillor Simon. There are also various online devices you can use. One I came across a fair while ago was called Bang the Table, which is a online interactive thing where the community can provide input into council. We obviously have to strike a balance between consulting and doing, which obviously you're aware of. We do consult a lot of the initiatives. Town Square is one, for example, that came from a community consultation, and many others do as well. So it's not true to say that some of those things you mentioned didn't come from the community, not from the whole community, but from a section of it. But however, this is a motion which encourages us to explore that idea in more depth, I understand. And is that what essentially you're saying? Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Peter, did you want to say something? No? You're all right. Are there any others? If not, sorry, Councillor Jason.
I think what Simon's saying is a good idea. Even like saying there's this other option, bang the table. It's stuff I've never heard of.
Yeah.
Is there a way we can perhaps have a workshop or something so we can all? Because I think this is quite a big subject. I mean, we should look into, and certainly even get out information like that so people know there's options and availability for them to put information across the council. Is a workshop an idea?
That's an interesting suggestion, I think, and is certainly something that is possible to do. Councillor Lynette.
I'm just thinking that then that would be give everybody a chance to make up a business plan in their mind. Once we've had a workshop, then they could work out how to pay for it. You've got to work out how to pay for it.
The question then arises, following on from Councillor Jason's suggestion, whether you would like to modify your proposed motion to include the concept of workshop, or whether you want to leave it as it is. Councillor Simon, that's the question.
And so I'm not 100% sure that the workshop is something that the councils would do, or is it a workshop that we run with the community to tell us?
I think from my point of view, it'd be a workshop for us to get our heads around it to start with. And then once we've got a plan of action, and we can actually put something out there and go, well, you've got these different options. Do we do, like you're saying, put paperwork out with rates notice? Do we run apps online? How would we actually tackle it? Because I think the idea is great, but how do we actually tackle it? So we look into it first, and then from there go further.
So in effect, instead of just a report which involves the staff providing input, what this does is enables the staff and elected members to provide input. Is that what you're suggesting, Councillor Jason?
Correct, yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's a great idea, yeah. The more the merrier, for sure. The more people that can.
So we need to, in that case, to assist our minute taker, and so we know actually what we're voting about. And this is actually interesting that this happened, because this illustrates why there is an advantage in us having it up on the screen. So would you suggest changing the second dot point to conduct a workshop at an appropriate time, which examines how we can better engage in community, how we can better engage with the community? Something along those lines?
I think something along those lines would be great. I still would be, I think that the administration has a lot more knowledge about this and obviously practice on this. So I'd be very happy for them to tell us what can be done and what they have done and that sort of stuff, on top of us obviously having ideas as well. So yes, I think if we can have both together would be great.
So conduct a workshop at an appropriate time to investigate how council can better engage with the community. Would that summarise it, or do you want to add a bit more detail and just putting the bare bones down, and you might want to expand on that or not? And you could incorporate your step-by-step bit in that if you wanted to. Anyway, let's see what appears up on the screen, and then we can modify it as we go. For the council to, now we need some words into investigate ways to better engage with the community. Absolutely, yes. So, I think what Councillor Simon is suggesting is that we could possibly have after that another dot point that says that arising from that workshop, a report be presented to a future council meeting outlining steps to achieve better engagement. It's gone in here and out here. Sorry, I haven't got it. Are you happy with that, Councillor Simon?
Yeah, I think that looks good. The only thing is the timeline. At an appropriate time, can we put some sort of
yes, perhaps we can change that to as soon as
practicable? Yeah.
practicable or something like that. So Stacey, where it's got an appropriate time, we perhaps change that as soon as practicable. So Councillor Simon's suggestion. Practicable. So we'll get this right in a minute, but it's just a matter of then we are to see exactly what we're voting on. Conduct a workshop as soon as practicable, I think it should be probably. See what that'll do, I suppose.
Sorry?
I think practical should be practicable. I defer to the experts. Is that right, Lynette? Okay. Okay, Councillor Simon, now we've got up there what we think it ought to be. Are you happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy with that.
Thanks. Are you moving that then, Councillor Simon? Moved by Councillor Simon, seconded by, Councillor Peter. Sorry, Councillor Jost. Any further discussion? All in favour? That's carried. Thank you for that. And that actually illustrates the advantage, I think, of having the minutes on the screen, because we can then actually see exactly what we're voting for, not taking it on trust as we otherwise might be tempted to do. So that's the end of the notices of motions on notice. We now come to motions without notice. Do we have any? No. Okay, we then move on to confidential items, and there is a question I need to ask here, because Brian, for the first item, wants to give a presentation, which I don't believe needs to be in confidence. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So members of staff and gallery can remain for this presentation by Brian, and that relates to the first recommendation about going to confidence about the Drovers Encounter project update costs and benefits. So I'll hand over to you, Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. In referring to this, we also have Sean Keenahan from Norman's Online, who will be able to assist the council with this particular matter. I received an email from Councillor Simon, who expressed a few issues relating to the report that is currently in confidence. And that was sent to me a few days ago, and I thank Councillor Simon for that, sending it through. I appreciate that very much. It gave management an opportunity to have a look at the views that were being expressed, and we responded accordingly. As a result, there was an addendum to the report that tried to answer some of the questions that were raised. But prior to getting to that particular report, a more fundamental question really does need to be answered by the chamber, and that's to do with the exercise of the confidentiality provisions of the Local Government Act. And what's before you is a recommendation that we go into confidence, basically based on the commercial legal position and advice that we've received. When I received the note from Councillor Simon, it became apparent that there's probably other options that the chamber would like to give consideration to. One, yeah, and they can be given out now. In fact, I emailed them to the elected members. The four options are: release all documents on the premise that the public interest in the information relating to drovers outweighs the perceived commercial risks for the project, except matters expressly required to be kept confidential by third parties. We need to put that in there, because if there is an express requirement for information that's been provided to council or council's management to be kept confidential, then we really do have a legal duty to honour that. The second option is to release a prepared public statement outlining council's commitment and the costs thus far towards the project. And in the addendum, it's fairly clear what those costs are, and it's also in Kyram's report as well. The option 3 is to hold all documents in confidence based on the commercial legal advice, and that's as printed in the agenda pages on page 106. And option 4 is a combination of options 1 and 2, which in effect says release all the documents together with a prepared public statement. Just so elected members fully understand the management's approach to this is we get advice where we can, and we look at matters from a risk point of view. So we take into account the legal and financial risks, but we also take into account other risks such as political risks and reputation risks. So with a project like Drovers Encounter, which is requiring other parties to be involved, and for it to be successful, it will require a positive interest from federal and state governments, and it will also require positive interests from the private sector. So if we're going to enjoy the same sort of responses that we've had in the past, it's important for the marketplace to see the council as being in a positive position about this project. The release of information and how much of that information is to be released is down to a bit of judgment. So just recently, I think I mentioned at the last meeting, Mr. Acting Mayor, that Tony Passon at the opening of the East Terrace bypass made the point that Light Regional Council has been very successful in getting grants because it delivers the outcomes. And when he said that, he acknowledged the great work that Richard Dodson's with his team has done in this infrastructure area. That it's a perception within the marketplace that council and management work well together, and that Light Regional Council has a very positive public profile. It's very clear that the other spheres of government, when they are awarding grants, and we've got advice today for another grant which is still embargoed, but will be announced in the next few days, as the Acting Mayor made a comment about. They do take into account the delivery ability and the position of a council and how they operate. They definitely take that into account. Tony Passon made that very clear. The private sector also take into account what the risks are in terms of investing capital with a council. So in that backdrop, it really gets down to a bit of judgment as to whether it's prudent to release information around Drovers Encounter and the project, to release that information now, or whether that gets released later, or whether parts of that information gets released now and some of it's held back. The only thing that I would have to emphasise is that where we have received information from third parties on the understanding it would expressly be kept confidential, I think it is absolutely prudent on council to do that. So that's sort of opening remarks about it, Mr. Acting Mayor. Management put forward recommendations based on the information that we have available to us, but it is a judgment of the chamber. And we respect that, we understand that, and that's the reason why we've organised Sean Keenahan from Normans to give advice to the chamber if it needs, based on the commercial legal advice. And I put a comment down there that there is merit in option 4 because it would provide the opportunity for management to further promote the project to private partners, federal and state governments. So releasing information with a positive statement, provided that release of that information doesn't prejudice third-party rights, then that is an option for the council to consider.
Thank you, Brian. Just a question. In your assessment, there obviously, as the legal advice says, there is some risk in keeping confidential, but there's also some risk in, sorry, not keeping it confidential. I mean, there's also some risk in keeping it confidential because there is a perception, could be a political risk in the perception that the council is keeping information to itself that ought to be in the public realm.
Yeah.
So what is your assessment of the, because as you said, it's a matter of judgment. The judgment is there more risk in keeping confidential or more risk in releasing it? And the risks will be different, but what, would you just like to talk about that, or if you feel comfortable?
Yeah, well, look, I'm comfortable to put what I think, and I'm sure what I'm going to be putting forward is probably not what the legal advice would be, because the lawyers are there and they've got plenty of examples that they've provided us, which would indicate that it could go the wrong way if you're released prematurely. And maybe we should ask Sean to make comment about that to give balance in the chamber. From a view that I take is that sometimes if a chamber is holding back information and too much of that information and there's argument about it, then it could send a message into the marketplace that there is problems at Light Regional Council in terms of doing this project. And that could be more detrimental to actually advancing this project than releasing the information with a prepared statement. So there are legal and commercial reasons why you would hold it back. There are also very good reasons from a community perspective, political perspective, reputation perspective, to get information out there. And that's the reason why I've said that there probably is merit in option 4, which is to release the information, but with a prepared statement outlining council's commitment and cost thus far towards the project.
Thank you for that. Does anyone want to ask any questions of Brian or of Sean Keenahan? By the way, welcome to Sean. Councillor Lynette.
I'm looking at option 3, and that would be what we are doing now. Is that correct?
Option 3 is what's in the agenda. Yeah.
Option 3 is basically the recommendation that was in the
stay the
agenda
same.
put out, staying the same.
Yeah, that's in the agenda.
So that would mean that if we went down the option 3 route, that would mean that report 16.1 would be considered in confidence. If we went down option 4 route, it would mean that the Dresden Encounter project update cost and benefit 16.1 would be debated and considered in open forum, not in confidence. Councillor Solomon.
I do have a question, and I think I sort of pointed it out in my original email, is how or why really there was two separate motions being moved at last meeting, and they got bundled into one report. So in my opinion, that makes it more difficult to answer these two motions, which were clearly separate. So if there would have been two different reports, then one could stay in confident and the other could be public. What I'm trying to say is that just the cost, my motion was all about just releasing the cost, and I don't see any commercial problem with that. Maybe I just don't know, but I really can't see that there's any issue. It's just telling the public how much money has been spent so far. Whereas the other stuff, where the councillor or acting mayor Rolak's motion, there was a lot more information that could be commercially, sensitive and all that sort of stuff. So, in my opinion, if there would be two, and that's what I expected, then the first one could just be in public. The second one, we could have a prepared statement to release and just release what needs to be released and what isn't. I don't think in the public there's that much more interest than just tell us what you're spending, and we could so easily answer that, and I don't think there would be any problem. So I still don't know why do we have this bundled into one, and could we resolve that right here, right now, and saying, okay, we're saying one is this, and we just release those numbers, and the other we can solve with a nice prepared statement, which in the end is still an option 4, I suppose.
Brian, do you want to comment this? I believe there was some information on that provided.
Yeah, look, I asked Kyron as to the reasoning, and it was quite logical why they were bundled together. And Kyron actually gave an email to me, which I circulated to the elected members on the reasoning. However, that's been done, and I certainly understand and acknowledge what Councillor Simon is saying. They could have easily been dealt with as two separate reports, and in fact, Kyron said it was him being highly efficient by putting them together because they were about the same subject. So I sort of understand what's happened, and I certainly take the view from Councillor Simon is to get the number out there, and that could be simply option 2. Release a prepared public statement outlining council's commitment and cost thus far towards the project would satisfy, I think, what Councillor Simon is attempting to do, is to get that information out there, and management don't have a problem with that at all, about getting that information out there in a public statement. So it could be as simple as we prepare a public statement, we circulate that to the elected members, outlining council's commitment and cost thus far, and that can be done after the meeting. And if the elected members are satisfied with that, that will in effect resolve the issue that Councillor Simon's raised. In the meantime, the rest of the material can stay in confidence, but we do know as management there will need to be a timely release of this information, because federal and state governments will want to know, private sector parties will want to know as we engage with them. The commercial legal advice is hold your cards a bit close to the chest when you're dealing with the private sector, because you want to get the best value you can for your community. And that's sort of the reasoning why they say keep some of it close. So that's the balance, and that's the judgment. That's the balancing act and the judgment that the chamber has to go through.
Thank you, Brian. This is a decision of council. It's not a decision of management. Management has given us options. We have to make the decision. Councillor Lynette, you had a comment to make?
I just have a question. Can we have the legal advice on whichever one we take after we've decided on it, please?
We have Sean available to us. And Richard Michael might be able to help me here, but I think option 2 is basically leaving things in confidence, but preparing a statement, issuing the costs, and that's in effect what option 2 is proposing.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah.
Sean, welcome to the meeting. Do you want to make a comment?
Thank you very much, Acting Mayor. I was just going to say, based on what I've heard, it sounds to me as though option 2 is an elegant solution to the objectives of what I've heard so far from the chamber. You're right, though, when you set out my basic concern around releasing too much information regarding a project where you're trying to realise best value for the community, because sometimes the release of information concerning a project, in particular its cost base, can actually establish unwantedly a benchmark that the private sector sees as being a fair return to the council. It can be an indicator, a market lead or a market indicator as to what the council wants to achieve. In this case, just from what I understand, that's probably not the case. There will be occasions where the council's involved in land assemblage, in work related to a project to present an opportunity to best value, and it will want to keep that value that it's created. It'll want to create that confidential to heighten market competitiveness and to get the best possible revenue for the benefit of the community. This case, I think, it sounds to me as though the nature of the cost, the nature of what's being proposed, releasing that is not going to jeopardise that competitive tension. That's the sense I get. I think releasing the costs together with a statement around the commitment towards the project is a really positive thing in light of the conversation. Keeping the broader conversation around strategic objectives, opportunities, the research, the parties that have been engaged along the journey, keeping that confidential, I still see a value in keeping that confidential, because that is what is being brought, that is what will be brought, that intellectual property is what will be brought to market to try and realise the best possible outcome and engagement with the private sector. So on balance, I'd say the discussions around option 2 sound eminently sensible in the circumstances.
Thank you for that, Sean. Does anyone have any questions of Sean or Brian or anyone else, or want to express an opinion? So basically what Sean is saying is that if we release the costing information as outlined in option 2 and keep all the rest of it confidential, in other words, keep the general reports confidential, if the public gets the information they need about costs, we preserve our or lower our commercial risk so that we get the best outcome. And of course, the best outcome means the best outcome for ratepayers, because the best return means the best return for ratepayers. So it is a balanced approach which releases what people want to know, and yet the other stuff is kept in confidence. That's basically, I understand what you're saying, Sean, is that correct?
That's correct, Acting Mayor Dean, correct.
Okay, so just look at the time, it's 7:24. We need to have broken for tea about a few minutes ago, so we probably have got just time prior to tea to, can you just he doesn't mind waiting. He doesn't mind. Okay, so I've just got a message from the caterer. He doesn't mind waiting a bit longer, so we might as well deal with this while we can, rather than worry about tea time. There is, for each of these options, there is a recommendation. The one that will satisfy Councillor Simon's concerns, and which would, according to our legal advice from Sean just then, minimise risk while providing information people might be interested in finding out is option 2, and there's a proposed recommendation there which covers that. I'm just seeking some guidance here. If people generally think option 2 is the way we should go, then we could move that. Get someone to. Councillor David.
I'm still trying to get my head around the different options, and it's a judgment call whichever way you go.
It's the correct.
Is there any problem with us leaving this on the table till the next council meeting to give us more time to thoroughly think about it and come to a conclusion? That's my thought with it.
My question is there any urgency in this, or I'd be, that's a good question, Councillor David, and be interested in what people think about that in the way of staff members or elected members, or whether there are any potential pitfalls in doing that. Brian, have you got any?
Definitely the actual that has yeah, so the decision as to whether you go to confidence and the confidential report will lay on the table.
So, Councillor Simon, since you and I are the two people who put up the motions that this is actually in response to, I guess how you feel about it and how I feel about it is probably relevant. And as far as I'm personally concerned, it doesn't worry me. How about you?
Yeah, as long as we can just release those costs in a nice public statement, I'm happy with that. But could we do that though before? I think it looks like we're going into confidence, and then while we're in confidence, we decide on how this public statement going to look like, or is that correct?
Just for some clarity, if option 2 was adopted this evening, then the process we would follow is we'd prepare a draft statement, circulate it to the elected members to make sure that they're comfortable with that statement, that it's covering off on the issues that what covered, and then once that's the elected members have said, yeah, that's the sort of statement we should issue, then we'll issue it.
Would it be, in terms of Councillor David's suggestion, would it be feasible to move option 2 and then leave the rest of it lying on the table, like this recommendation, and consider that together with the statement at the next council meeting? Is that what you're suggesting, or I'm not sure?
Well, you wouldn't need to go into confidence to deal with Drover's encounter because you're not going to deal with the report.
That's right, yeah.
So I think what Councillor David is saying, if you lay them on the table, you're actually laying both on the table. You either lay both on the table or you deal with it tonight. Yeah.
And I prefer to just make sure that we get this statement out. As we wouldn't need another resolution, another council meeting. We could in confidence talk about what's going to go out, which in my opinion definitely need to be that cost. And then we could release, and you guys could prepare a statement, and during the week we could agree on the statement, and it could go out like within a week or something. I'll be happy with that, and the rest can be in confidence.
I'm not sure what we just what happy with.
What Councillor Simon is suggesting that we could adopt option 2. We could go into confidence to deal with the Drover's report. In dealing with that report, give an indication of the things that we'd like in the statement. We'd prepare a statement, circulate it to elected members. If the elected members are happy with it, we'll issue it. It'll all be done within a week.
Yes, it sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
So we've got to the stage where it's 7:30. It's time for tea. So would it be appropriate if we move that recommendation and then broke for tea before we actually went into confidence. We better do not. Yeah. Okay, so if you're generally happy with that approach, then we'll break for tea now, because what'll happen afterwards is in confidence. If we adopt that approach, if you're generally happy with that and that direction we're going, then that doesn't mean that people in Gary have to hang around and see what's going to happen. So in that case, if you, we will break for tea, and at this stage, I'd just like to say two things. One, thank you for enabling us to get through a very large agenda up into the confidential bit very expeditiously. And two, I feel like just like I'm back at school the first day back after term, where I speak so much that I get hoarse, which has just happened. I need a break. And thank you very much to Sean on stage. Sorry, on screen, not stage. And we appreciate your input, and that was most valuable. So thank you, and thank you for the advice you've given us previously as well.
Thank you, Acting Mayor.
And it will be about 5 minutes to thank you all. I think we're all here again, so we'll resume our meeting. And we are still in the ordinary meeting, not yet in the confidence. And prior to the tea break, we considered 4 options. And I gained the sense from the meeting that following on the advice from Sean and assurance from Simon that satisfied his requirements, we were tending towards option 2. And I think what Sean was saying was that provides a balance between releasing information the public probably looking for, like the cost information, and yet keeping confidential stuff that might cause a less salubrious outcome for our project. And so there is a proposed recommendation which will action option 2, which basically consists of the first part of that is similar to what was in our original agenda. The second part is that one about we discussed about the media release for public information. So I open the meeting to for comment if anyone wishes to suggest a different approach, or whether you're happy with that. If you are, then we can move straight into moving that. Councillor Peter, did you want to say something?
Yes, I do. Considering the situation and the lack of knowledge of the ratepayers, I'm impressed by option 1. And I think option 1 is tried, it's precise, and it finishes with except matters expressly required to be kept confidential by third parties. Now, that's my view anyway.
Thank you for that. Any other comments?
I do have a
Yes,
comment. Thank you. I do have a comment, but not about the, not necessarily about this proposed recommendation. Are we just talking about this recommendation right now? Better then I'll leave my comment for when we talk about the report maybe. Or
Okay, thank you. So we have a recommendation on the screen, which is translating option 2 into a recommendation. The first thing I'll do is ask whether someone would like to move that.
Yeah, the one on the screen is the one that was in the agenda, the original one. But
Yeah,
the
the one which
option
basically
two-
says Brian will prepare a report which releases all the necessary financial information. With some background to make that sensible, and that will be circulated within a week to elected members who may comment, and if the comments are all positive, then that will then be action straight away. And then to take into account Sean Kinahan's suggestion. So basically, we had legal advice that says keep the whole lot confidential. In listening to the discussion tonight, Sean has provided alternative advice, which is release the financial information with some suitable background, but keep the other stuff in confidence because that will provide less risk for the commercial aspects of the project. Mark.
Can I just confirm, so option 2, the first part of the recommendation is the part we vote to go into confidence, and the second part of the recommendation is one we discuss in confidence? Or is that all, voted on together?
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. The option 2 is the first part of it, which is to move into confidential session, is the motion that's printed in your agenda, so no change. The second part relates when you come out of confidential session and you move the section 91(7) resolution, which says to keep the matters confidential, but in this case, we're adding a rider that there'll be a public paper released. So one remains the first part remains the same. Second part gives the order to act. Okay? And then you consider in confidence whatever resolution is printed in the confidential agenda. Any questions on that? Thank you.
Okay, so basically, if we do what Richard has proposed in this recommendation, we'll be able to action Brian's media release within a week, hopefully. We'll have it released for us to comment about within a week and then released publicly. So has anyone got any more questions? I realise this is it's a fairly complex matter, but I think we've brought it down to a compromise situation that if we take Sean's advice, which provides a balance between release and confidentiality.
But based on the advice we've got, I'm happy to move option 2.
Thank you. I've got a mover. Do I have a seconder? Moved, seconded by Jason. Thank you. And Richard, do you want to say something?
Sorry, I think if I've picked up from Richard Michael correctly, we haven't moved to go into confidence, and we should do that first.
Well, the first recommendation does that, doesn't it?
It is
exactly the same, Richard said.
I thought it had a bit extra on. Okay, that's right. Sorry.
Perhaps you can just clarify that again, Richard, because I thought I understood you.
Yeah, no, the process is, and which I understand Councillor Frankham is moving, is the first resolution that's shown in your printed agenda. Okay, you're stepping into confidential session.
Yep.
So
And the second one actually.
The second one happens after you come out of confidential session.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Any other comments or questions? Sorry, that was moved by Councillor Mark, seconded by Councillor Jason. Sorry about that, Stacey. I didn't realise that. I didn't look and see that you hadn't actually recorded that. So now that that's clarified, we've got it moved and seconded. Now put motion, all in favour, against, carried. Thank you for that. So to develop a media release for public information about the Drovers Encounter project, which discusses council's commitment to the proposed project, its aims, the costs incurred to date, and perceived community and market benefits attached to the preparation of the project. So that is the second recommendation for two parts of, which Stacey has now put up on the screen. So we now need a mover of that, moved by Councillor Jason, seconded Councillor Mark. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion, all in favour, and that's carried. Thank you. So with that one has been disposed of, and we now head off to 16.2, and we have a motion there. Are you up to date, Casey? Stacey? Yeah, it's this one here. Sorry, I got that one out, the wrong one. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I put it on here. Yeah. So 16.2 is on unsolicited proposal, sorry. And there are two recommendations to that. One is that under the provisions of section 92, part 2 and 3 of the Local Government Act, an order be made that with the exception of those persons listed and all other persons, etc., that the 16.2 relative to the provision of commercial information of a confidential nature, not being a trade secret, the disclosure of which could reasonably be expected to prejudice the commercial position of the person who supplied the information, or to confer a commercial advantage on a third party. That accordingly, on this basis, the principle that meetings of Light Regional Council should be conducted in a place open to the public has been outweighed by the need to keep the discussion confidential. So basically, this is saying that for commercially incompetent reason, we need to go to confidence. Anyone moved by Councillor Mark, seconded by Councillor Sharon? Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you. That's the one? Yes, that's the one. So it's up on the screen, and now I've forgotten whether it's moved by Councillor Mark and seconded by Councillor Lynette, I think. Is that correct? Okay. Yep. I'm getting brain fade, but anyway, that's, thank you, Councillor Mark, for seconding that, and Councillor for moving it, and Councillor Lynette for seconding it. So it's now been moved and seconded. Put it to the vote. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Now that's dealt with, and we have 16.3, which is the last item. 16.3 is the review of the confidential register, and there is a recommendation in the ordinary agenda about, under the provision of the Local Government Act, that the matter must be considered in confidence in order to ensure that the council does not breach any law, order or direction of the court or tribunal constituted by law and duty of confidence or other legal obligation or duty. That's the reason. It's fairly heavy. Someone like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Jason, seconded by Councillor Simon. All in favour? That's carried. That it be kept confidential until the matter is finalised. Moved by Councillor Mark, seconded by Councillor Jason. Any comment? All in favour? Carried. Thank you. So we now have come to the end of the confidential agenda, and we're back in the ordinary agenda. And we're right back to our next meeting, which will be the 4th Tuesday in July. The 22nd of July. 26th of July, sorry, I didn't hear you properly. So the next meeting of 26th, and before closing the meeting, I thank you for your cooperation in expediting a very lengthy agenda, providing good discussion points when needed, but not wasting time on bits that didn't require it. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. And I declare the meeting closed.
Good work, Stacey.